Hey guys, Chris the Midwest Bass Hunter. Today I want to talk about spinnerbaits, how to use them, when to use them, and what to use them on. So a spinnerbait is a very simple bait. It's basically a jig head, right there, jig head. So it's got a hook, it's got a skirt, lead, and then it has a wire coming off of it. The wire usually has a single or multiple blades on the wire. There are lots of different blades and lots of different variations, and there is a time and place for all of them. I'm going to cover the main two, what I would call the main two, and I think that these pretty much cover the spectrum. Now you can definitely fine tune it with some different blades and doing some different things, but typically I settle for these two types just to keep it simple. All right, so the first type is willow blades. So these are willow blades, and this one has two willow blades on it, double willow. Willow blades are typically going to give you a lot more flash, a lot more reflection in the water, and not as much vibration, although they still provide lots of vibration. When these blades are spinning in the water, this wire is actually kind of vibrating, and it causes vibration, noise from the blades. They actually make a lot of clicking noises in the water. And basically it's going to replicate some bait fish going through the water. So for willow blade spinnerbaits, I typically like to use these in clear, very clean to stained water. Typically not when it's super dirty, because it's more about a sight thing with the willow blade, in my opinion, than it is the vibration and the feel of it. This particular spinnerbait has a willow blade and a Colorado blade on it, which is the other blade we're going to talk about. So it's kind of a mixture of the both. But the dominant blade is the willow blade. So the next type of spinnerbait is a Colorado blade spinnerbait. And as you can see, the Colorado blade is more rounded. It's more of a teardrop shape, and it's more wide, less long. So the Colorado blade is going to have much more thump and vibration, hard vibration in the water than a willow blade spinnerbait. And it will have less flash because obviously this is not as long, and it's going to have less light reflecting off of it. And as you can see, this is a dark color. Now I like to use dark colors in dirty water, and typically I buy Colorado blade spinnerbaits that are dark colors, black or blue or something dark like that, because I'm going to fish Colorado blade baits in dirty, stained to dirty water, to muddy water, where there's less sight and the fish is relying more on what he can sense and feel to find his food. So that's when I'm going to use this bait, and that's when this bait shines. That does not mean that you cannot take this bait out and throw it in crystal clear water and still catch fish. You can, you will, but ideally it works better. It's going to be more beneficial and is designed really to work more in dirty water. And the same thing with the willow blade. Not super clean water, but it's designed to work from that clean to stained, a little bit dirty area. There we go. All right, so spinnerbaits, and I have some real crazy ones, but I don't have them with me. But you can get some pretty crazy spinnerbaits, right? Where there's blades all over the place and they're kind of funky looking. Honestly, some of them don't work that great. They get a little too complicated and they don't run like they're supposed to. Here's an example. This is a 4-blade spinnerbait, but this one works great. I mean, these actually work really good. And obviously this is gonna look to the bass like a bunch of little bait fish kind of schooled up and swimming together. I try not to get too crazy on them though, because I like to try weird stuff, but typically I fall back on the stuff that's more simple because it just seems to work better. The color of the blades really depends on what kind of bait fish are in your lake. I usually don't get too hung up on the color of the blades. If a spinnerbait has gold blades or bronze blades or chrome or silver blades, I'm typically okay with that. I'm more worried about the color of the skirt for what I'm attracting. But some days, sometimes you're fishing with gold blades, and if you switch to silver or chrome blades, it can change your bite. It can either have a positive or detrimental effect. So if you're fishing spinnerbaits and you're not getting the results that you like, just change it up, switch it up. Spinnerbaits are typically not that expensive, so I've got a whole box full of them. So if I want to fish with a spinnerbait, or if I think that that's what I should be fishing with, I try one, doesn't work, I can switch it up and change it by either changing the color or changing to a different blade. The other thing is there's hammered blades. So this is what you call a hammered blade. This is just a smooth blade. See the difference? So the difference really with the hammered and smooth blade is just how the light's gonna like bounce off the blade. So obviously this is just gonna bounce off, you know, one direction. This has all these little dimples in it. The light's gonna bounce off it a little differently. Just add a little bit of a different look. Honestly, I don't pay too much attention to whether the blades are hammered or smooth. I think they both work well. I've caught fish in all different situations on both of them, so I don't get too hung up on that. I do think that in a Colorado blade, now this isn't what you'd call traditionally hammered, but it's a hammered blade, but it's got a real clear pattern on it, and it's a pretty heavy hammering. So these are just really small dimples on this one, and these are pretty big on this Colorado blade. I actually think that those bigger dimples give it a little bit more vibration compared to a smooth Colorado blade. So for trailers, I typically use a paddle tail swim bait. This is a Kayak 3.5 inch paddle tail. It's not a very big bait, it's not real bulky, it just adds a little action to the back of the lure. You can also use another one I really like to use is just a regular grub, like a twister tail grub. Those work really good, add a lot of action to the bait. I don't really use much else than that. You can also run the spinnerbait without a trailer at all, which I've actually probably caught more fish on a spinnerbait without a trailer than with. But if I do run a trailer, I like to use a swim bait, a paddle tail swim bait, and just thread it on there. Obviously you want it to be straight, and you don't want it, you want it to sit on there real nicely. And that's just gonna be back there kicking around just like if you're fishing that swim bait by itself. Add a little bit more bulk to the lure, a little bit more action, and when the fish bites it, he might get a little bit of that rubber and make it think that it's a real fish, and maybe hold on to it a little bit longer and give you more of a chance to set the hook. But yeah, that's a pretty good combination right there. Now, like I said, you can also run them without a trailer at all, which I do that, you know, probably 50% of the time. All right, the last thing I want to talk about on the baits is the trailer hook. So I have some trailer hooks. Let's see if I can get them out of here. A trailer hook goes over the bait's regular hook, just like that. And what you do is you take a little piece of rubber and you poke it through there so that the bait can't come off, because otherwise the hook can just come right off of there. Now, I actually don't have any of the little pieces of rubber. It's like a little piece of rubber tube. Just put it over the eyelet of the hook, poke it through the rubber and through the eyelet like that, and it stays put. And I don't have any of those, and I'm going to tell you why, because I never use trailer hooks. I will show you a little trick on how you can use a trailer hook if you don't have the little rubber tubing or whatever that you need. So right here, I actually have a little Senko. And I'm going to just poke the eyelet of the worm right through there. The eyelet of the hook right through the Senko. And I'm going to just cut it off. There we go, just like that. So now that little piece of worm is going to keep that bait or that hook from coming off of there, keep it stay put. It might tear up after a few fish, you might have to replace it, but if you don't have the little tubing, you can use that, or anything that's plastic or rubber that you can thread on there to keep that in place. Now, I never use a trailer hook, and let me tell you why. I actually think I've used trailer hooks in the past, both on spinnerbaits and buzzbaits, and I think that I have lost more fish because of it. I think that when I use a trailer hook, a lot of times they'll get double hooked and they have more leverage, it seems like, to throw that hook out. But I don't know, I fish with the trailer hook, and I honestly think that I lose more fish because of it. The other thing is, a lot of times you'll cast it out there and my trailer hook will do that. It'll get tangled up in my blade, and I just don't like it. I think it complicates the bait, and I really don't think it adds that much benefit. So I just don't use it. All right, guys, now we're gonna get down to the equipment that you use with the spinnerbait. So this is my spinnerbait setup. It is a spinnerbait rod designed for running spinnerbaits, but you don't have to have a specific spinnerbait rod. But I'll tell you a little bit about what I have, and then I'll tell you, you know, what you can use if you don't have something this specific. Okay, so this is a loose TP1 speed stick. It's the black series. It's really cool. You know, it's a neat looking rod. I like it. It's got the wind grips, a really comfortable rod. It's not that long. It's only 6'10". I like a little bit shorter rod. I do a lot of sidearm casting when I'm casting spinnerbaits, and a lot of times you're trying to, you know, get it under some cover. Spinnerbaits work super good around hard cover like docks and down trees and stuff like that. So I like to have a shorter rod so I can really, you know, get it in and around those things without having a big rod that's difficult to cast. This is a medium heavy action with a moderate fast taper. So it's got a good amount of backbone, but it's got a good flexible tip. It's got some tip to it. Not a lot, because when you're winding a spinnerbait, it creates a lot of drag in the water. So you don't want to have a real soft rod. It's going to bend your rod way over. The fish is going to hit the bait, and you're not going to have the backbone you need to set the hook. So you really, in my opinion, you really need a medium heavy rod. You could probably get away with a medium that's a little bit on the stiffer side, but definitely medium heavy is the ticket. Like I said, this is a 6'10" rod. It's not extremely long. Then I have that paired up with a Blues Tournament MP, and I have that in 6.8 to 1 gear ratio. And the reason I have it in that gear ratio is because I typically, on moving baits, I typically tend to move the bait. I typically tend to reel too fast. I get excited, I reel too fast. So especially if I'm struggling to find fish, I get quicker. I speed up what I'm doing, which doesn't usually help. So it works for me to have a reel that's not super fast. Now you could definitely run you know, up to a 7.5. I would say I wouldn't want to go much faster than that, but you're just gonna have to reel slower, because if you reel this bait too quickly, it's gonna just rise up to the surface, and you can catch fish doing that with it, you know, but typically you want this to be a little bit further down in the water column. So I like a 6.8 to 1. It's not slow, but it's not super fast. For line, on this reel right now, I have 15-pound fluorocarbon. You could run anywhere from 10 to 15. I probably wouldn't go much more than 15. I mean, you could. It's not really going to affect the bait too much, but it might affect how easily the bait can get down in the water column. The thinner line, the smaller weight, you know, the smaller line is going to have a smaller diameter. It's going to sink quicker. It's going to have less drag when it's sinking through the water column. So I like to use 15. It's a good all-around line, but I would go down as low as probably 12. I'm not sure I would go to 10. I just don't see the benefit of going down that small. So I would keep it, you know, I like to use the heaviest line I can get away with, right? Because you're gonna land more fish that way. So I don't like to break off lures, so I go with the heavier line. So that's my basic setup, guys. And it works really good. I've caught a lot of fish on this year. Tons and tons of fish on this. That is my spinnerbait setup, and that is a little bit about the spinnerbait. I hope that this is a beneficial video to you today, and hopefully you get out there and catch some fish on a spinnerbait soon. All right, guys, if you're new to my channel, please subscribe, hit that little bell down there so you don't miss anything. And thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.